£1 से मुझे क्या मिलेगा सुचिता? £1.
I don't even you need to prepare me for these opening statements of yours. I'm not even joking. I feel like I need something rehearsed and orchestrated. Otherwise, I will say stupid shit and then force Jalasmi and Vishnu to edit it out. £1 से आपको
This is
कुछ
me
नहीं मिलने वाला है,
preparing for
boss.
my trip to London. I have got myself £1, and I'm
Obviously, your preparations
Can I go for
are
12
going
days
great.
in UK with £1?
Amazing. Let's see how long you last, Varun. But how are you, man? Are you all set for your holiday?
I'm all set. Thankfully not hungover, but my throat's recovering from a late night binge yesterday. So I have a deeply husky voice today on this podcast.
What is a late night binge, by the way? Like how much can
3
you,
a.m.
how much do you drink? Okay, not hour-wise,
I drank till
bro,
3
but
a.m. No.
Yeah, you can keep having Nimbu soda till 3 in the morning also. What's your capacity?
I would say lots of gin was had from about 8:30 p.m. till 3 a.m. So not bad. My capacity has come back for some weird reason. I had lost it in between when old age set in, but I think...
Same here. Yeah, it's I can't have more than 2 drinks. But in any case, before we bore you with our alcoholism, dear listeners, let's get into what happened this week, bro. What happened this week?
Mr. Musk came in late for an all hands with the Twitter employees, and randomly just logged in from his phone and just he basically hinted at layoffs. He had some random stuff to say about people coming into work because he believes that unless someone's super exceptional and they really want to keep them, then otherwise you just come into office and stuff like that. But generally doesn't seem to have been a great way to talk to the employees if this is the first time he's addressing them. But I mean... Twitter as always, because Twitter will comment about what's happening in Twitter as well. It's a little polarized. There's still the Musk boys, Musk fanboys who are yes, this is how you kind of bring it back to its this thing. And the others dude, what the f***?
Yeah, that whole thingamajig was very awkward and also not very reassuring. Do you think he's going to see this through? I feel at this point, he's just figuring out excuses to cop out.
Same. I think it's the same thing. He wants to kind of cop out. I think he's realized that this is going to be way more painful to deal with than anything. Because it's also a lot more self-centered for him. Twitter's this thing he plays with, and now he has to actually has to do something about it. So I think that's the problem. But speaking of people who are randomly this thing, Ashneer Grover, our favorite person who has been missing for a while, who famously said, "Main kabhi nahi lunga VC ka paisa." Has said, I want $300 million. He's getting it from VCs for his next startup. So, yes, these words don't last.
What's the lesson over here, bro? My takeaway from this is you can basically do whatever you want if you're a dude. Because, I mean, not to compare apples and oranges, but, we've seen how, for example, someone Ankiti Bose has literally gone into hiding, and God alone knows what happened over there. I don't know. It's just to me, it's wild. It's wild that this whole saga literally happened 3 months ago and now he's back and people are apparently cutting him checks.
Also, don't trust a guy who has a bright green car. I'm just leaving it out there for people. Someone buys a bright green colored car. Do not trust what they say. I don't know how you buy that color. Although I've seen a gold car here near home. There's a guy who's actually taken a car and made it gold. It's shiny gold. And I'm what is that?
You should go to Punjabi Bagh. You should honestly go to Punjabi Bagh. The most amazing, zaniest, wildest colors come alive. But did you read this wacko jacko tweet? There's an extramarital dating app called Collagen, which as per them has gained over 9 lakh new subscribers from India since the pandemic. Have you checked out this extramarital dating app called Collagen?
I have never used any dating app in my life. I have no intentions of using a dating app in my life. But I have not checked it out.
But generally just to see.
I've heard about it, yes.
But this is wild, dude. I mean, it's totally believable. And our producer, Jalasmi, was telling us that apparently it's run by 2 women and the original target customer for this app was women. So girls just want to have fun. But moving on to other companies who are not having a good time, Coinbase has laid off about 1,000 odd employees. I think one thing that I want to, say over here is... it was so nice to see the LinkedIn posts of these employees. There was no bashing of Coinbase. There was no, go die in a ditch Coinbase. Like, it was a very, you obviously feel, terrible in that scenario, but it was a very like rational take on, yes, we get, markets are totally screwed. Yes, we get that, this is, especially if you're in crypto, we understand that, the money may not be adding up over here, but really nice to see very, rational responses across the board.
Must have been handled really like delicately then, right? That's the only way this stuff comes out this way, because if you handle it right, people do kind of understand. And oftentimes the problem is not really the firing, it's about how it's done. So here I'm guessing it was done in a decent manner.
Yeah, but dude, big news for the ecosystem this week. Sequoia India has raised $2.8 billion, of which a significant amount will be deployed specifically in India. And then there's obviously a part of this that's carved out for Southeast Asia. Given that everyone's been talking about winter is here and this, that, and the other, to see, someone in the general sort of, realm of Sequoia India power through with such a strong raise is super, super interesting. And I think it's the news that all came out, parallelly to this, an article that was up on Cap Table is Surge, which is Sequoia's early stage, focused, that's led by Rajananandan, who's a gangster. That team and, Sequoia's venture team is merging and coming together because, there was I'm assuming there would have been some conversations around how both of them sometimes end up being in conflict with one another. If Surge puts money into something, venture doesn't back it. It's a, wrong signal to the market. So that's happening. So big news happening at Sequoia. No founders are complaining about them, which sounds like, a good week for them in general.
Yeah. But you think the merging will make it better in terms of how they function? Or do you think this is is it more internal, you feel? Or you feel will kind of change how they go out into the market?
I think it's definitely more internal because whatever I've read about Surge, which again, you never know, right? You never know what's genuinely happening behind closed doors. But I know that's been a big success in general. There have obviously been situations like Trell, which have come out, companies like Trell that have come out of Surge and, have obviously had multiple issues associated with it. But I think Surge at large has been a big success for Sequoia. But, when I was reading the Cap Table article, it makes sense. Like, it's difficult to build something super early and then, also have a team that's in this like awkward mid stage. Because if you look at where most venture bets are made, it's either early or it's, you see bets being made much later, right? Usually, for example, as a founder, your Series B is the toughest to raise. Series C, D are much easier because then, the guys who know predictable bets, those come in. Your C to Series A is very easy, but like Series B is actually where things get tough. And Sequoia was kind of like, playing in all three and then, none at all based on whether it was Surge, venture or growth. So logically speaking makes sense, but I don't know what the ramifications internally will be.
Yeah. Actually, a lot of stuff has happened this week. Mr. Binny Bansal has made a lot of money this week. Tencent bought his stake of Flipkart. For
only not £1, but $247 million. Not even rupees, dollars. So Binny Bansal is making money and you're stuck with £1. How does that feel?
£1,
Varun,
that's what I have.
How does that feel?
Does not feel good to do something about it. But Netflix is making a live version of Squid Game. They're basically doing a reality show, game show version of it. Not obviously going to shoot people in the head. But I think all the other stuff will happen. I think it's a good idea. I mean, we've spoken about the Mr. Beast thing in the past. So that worked really well. This could be a nice way for them to kind of extend the franchise. And it's going to be fun. I would watch it. Would you participate? Is my question. You would participate?
For funsies, yeah. I always wanted to... Did you ever watch that show on Nickelodeon? The one, what was it called?
The Slime.
That Ancient Treasures one where you had to like play all these, like temple games.
Oh, yeah,
it was very,
I forgot what it was.
Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Like it was inspired by that, but 100%, dude. Like this, like
so I have actually
IRL
participated and produced game shows in the past. I've done this for Channel V where I was even a participant and I have hurt myself in the game show because I had to go down this slide and I smacked my bum at the bottom of the pool because I went down at so much force that eventually they need to give me like padding on my behind to finish the rest of the thing. But it's a lot of fun to do game shows.
That is the wildest and dumbest story I ever heard.
I
What
was like,
is that even?
down, and
What
like
is that
smacked
even?
myself down, and so I had to give padding saying, okay, just in case you hurt it, to make
Oh
sure you
my
don't hurt
God.
yourself more.
Channel, we
I just,
need this footage so we can blast it all over the internet.
yes,
I would like
that's
pay
my
big
friend
money
though.
just to acquire this footage. Yeah, and
I
you
might
know,
have some,
like
I
some
might have
like
some
fun
photos online.
remakes.
I can find
Oh
photos
my
of me.
God.
Yeah.
But last couple of pieces, and then we can get into intros. Chios is looking to raise their Series C. That's what has been reported. Let's see if it's true or not. And Raga is a really good friend of mine. So, only joy if this news is true. Other thing was, M&A of the week. Ship Rocket is apparently set to acquire Picker. Both of them, again, competitors of sorts. I think Picker, if I'm not mistaken, does a lot of intra-city. Shiprocket obviously focuses a lot on intercity. Yeah, you're seeing a lot of, worlds collide and complementary partners come together, to do something interesting. So those are the other two interesting stories in the week, man.
Yeah, just before we get into what to talk about this week, we also got a lot of fun questions in from a lot of our listeners. So the end of the episode, we also going to dig into some of those. Some really cool questions kind of came in from a bunch of them. I think we've let Jalasmi decide whose questions get answered. She is the boss on this one, so we will just answer the questions, but she gets to pick which questions come to our faces. I don't know why I said faces, but faces. But what are we talking about this week? What are we talking about?
I am covering The Ordinary's launch on Nykaa and how the Indian company, which, kind of copied them, called the Minimalist, how things will fare for them, and also, general other news in the beauty world, which is Revlon's bankruptcy and Mukesh Ambani coming to their rescue. And the other thing that I'm talking about is your favorite topic, startup solving for erectile dysfunction. But we will not only talk about ED, we will also just generally talk about how startups are, picking up these kind of like awkward, taboo topics and taking them mainstream. So that's me. What about you, brother?
Lots of media news this week. The IPL rights, the auctions happened for the first time ever. We obviously have some interesting developments there, so we're going to dig into that. Also going to dig into the unlikely winner, or so seems like the winner of this entire streaming space is SonyLIV, where they've actually gotten the highest number of paying subscribers in that sense, right? So I think it's an interesting one to kind of dip into. And highest or second highest, if I remember right. But we'll get into that. And also this weird story from Dukaan, the platform that's trying to take on Shopify, and their CTO made a Twitter thread, and they then announced that they're going global. But lots to talk about Dukaan versus Shopify. And that's pretty much it from me. And then we're going to do questions from our listeners. But before everything else, me and my 1 pound need to go find more pounds. We'll be back after this short break. Welcome back to Think Fast, where we are first getting into Suchita's favorite sport, cricket. She has long dreamed of being an IPL team player or an IPL team owner. Which team would you want to own if you could own one?
I don't follow anything related to cricket. But yeah, I mean, hence I'm going to stay mute through this part of, our show and just ask you a shit ton of questions. But if I had to own a team, I don't know, who won this year? Delhi Daredevils.
Gujarat Titans. Gujarat
Titans. Oh. No, but is the IPL still relevant? I mean, before we get into the story, does anyone watch this anymore? What's the sitch there?
So the interesting part is that, right, this year the IPL added 2 more teams. And what happened because of that is suddenly went from 8 teams to 10 teams, and it just stretched the IPL really long. I've been an IPL consumer for the longest. Half the time I'd watch a highlight of a match, not the full match. But I would still watch almost every single match in that shorter form or the shortest form. This time I didn't. And that's actually the story across the board. There's been a genuine exhaustion of the amount of cricket that we always have going on. There's an insider joke I heard from someone who works in some of the sports networks saying that we are now competing with the Saas Bahu serials. Because the same way how you get a serial every day, you will need to have a match with India playing every day. So it's become that now. India or something connected to the Indian cricket team happening, let's say the IPL. So there is genuine exhaustion, and I also feel people felt a little stretched. Plus, the IPL over the years has suddenly diluted this one core thing that makes leagues work, which is fans really being loyal to one team. The format of how they kind of rejig the teams, like every couple of years, and I forget the number of years, you can go through an auction again. and all the teams largely switch except for a few people they retain. That takes away loyalty, right? You're loyal to players who are connected to certain teams. So some of the moves, it makes money sense because whenever these auctions happen, there's a lot of money that flies around. The auctions are fun to watch because you're literally watching bidding happening and all that stuff. But I think generally the big problem IPL will face, I feel in the long term, is that how do you make people kind of stay and watch and have some form of loyalty? A lot of the matches are fun, but there are too many matches now. So I think that's the big problem this year. The numbers were lower. I think the watch numbers were lower, but they're still supremely high in general, right, compared to most sport leagues. So I think that's not a near-term problem, but in the long term, that will be an issue, which also kind of shows why the bid was so high. Like the collective sum is 48,390 crores is what was eventually the selling price of the TV plus digital. But for the first time, Sony had it before and Stars had it for a while now. The rights got split. So TV rights stay with Disney and Star, but the digital rights have gone to Viacom, the newly focused on sports Viacom with Uday Shankar kind of popping in there, and it's going to be on Voot mostly. So it's interesting to see this split and how that would work. Also kind of will be good to see, does it really work on television more or on digital? Because I honestly believe it works on digital a lot more. That's how most people seem to watch the IPL. But enough of me giving you the information. What's your thoughts?
So, one, I don't even know how legit this race was, because from the sounds of it seems like it was always going to go to... Remember, when we first discussed the story and I'd asked you questions about Viacom 18 and how Uday Shankar, works, because you're obviously more embedded in that space than I am. But it almost seemed like it was a non-competition. And you kind of saw that happen, as a lead up to the bidding, right? You had Amazon randomly sort of peace out, Facebook not really being interested. Did Hotstar throw in their hat in the ring at all, or nothing, nada from them?
They did, but there was a rumor that they did intend to not go for both or go very high. I feel there was a genuine focus, because the last time when Star bought it, everybody was like, that makes no sense. Even now, these numbers, you have to sell the matches or in terms of just the ad and the brands to a certain level, which is crazy to even have this make sense. But it is arguably one of the biggest leagues in the world. So it still gets these. But if you just even compare it, right, this kind of the overall thing has been sold for, if you look at it, I'm just looking at the numbers here, $6.2 billion is what it amounts to, right?
Yeah.
And if you compare this to the FIFA World Cup, Sony paid $60 million for 2 FIFA World Cups. That's the difference in numbers. So
that is insane.
So, and that's the crazy part. It's look at other leagues, look at this one. It obviously is an insane amount of money being thrown here. But the thing with the IPL is, no matter what has happened around it, it still is here to stay. What my question is that at some point, this is not going to be financially viable. And at that point, what happens for the media networks more than anybody else?
I mean, logically speaking, if this is Voot's sort of hey, I am here, I exist announcement to the world, this is the best brand marketing exercise that they could possibly do for themselves, right? This is literally, if after all of this, they have to spend even $1, not literally but figuratively, on any amount of customer acquisition, then this money has definitely gone down the toilet. So I think the way I look at this is, from Voot's perspective, I think this is probably going to give them a large kicker than perhaps what SonyLIV has had to do, which is really build things up brick by brick.
Yeah.
And from the sounds of it, it's not Uday Shankar or Mukesh Ambani really play long-term games if they can have, short-term gains, through big, bold bets like this. I don't know. It almost seems like it's a part of the general universe of these two characters in the story of who's going to win India's streaming wars, or at least make a dent, in the overall scheme of things. That's how it comes across to me as an outsider. But this amount of money is absurd. I feel bad for the Hotstar sales team.
Yeah, exactly. What's going to happen to that sales team? But what's also happened is, in the last few months, I feel like everybody kind of thought this is going to happen anyway. It's almost felt like this is a foregone conclusion that they would get it.
Yeah.
A large number of people on the production end, if you just follow people's updates on LinkedIn, have all moved to Viacom Sports. So it's a lot of the same team. A lot of them have gone from Star Sports to Viacom already. Viacom's also started a certain amount of programming on sports, etc. But I think this is going to be the kicker. But what might also be interesting is BCCI is considering a women's IPL very soon. It's going to be interesting to see how that shapes up, which means it will have another IPL. Might not have, because it still hasn't come to that level. But I think an IPL-ish format might help women's cricket, because you've seen it come up a lot more in terms of just being present in periphery than before. So I think that could be interesting, and so on and so forth. But enough of cricket. What are you tapping into?
Please, guys. I can't handle this. This is like 8 minutes. This is 7 minutes longer than I can talk about cricket. Let's jump into obviously one more recent story before we get into the ED space is, I don't know if you saw, but Revlon apparently has filed for bankruptcy, and the rumor mills are flying that Mr. Mukesh Ambani, is likely to scoop in and, buy Revlon for, whatever a dirt cheap price. It was funny because a friend of mine messaged this to me yesterday. And I was like, what do you mean? He's going to buy their Indian subsidiary? And he's just like, no. He's going to buy the American Revlon. So, I mean, interesting to see, the general sort of Ambani ecosystem get out of just the typical Indian brands that you end up hearing them acquire and actually think about bets like this. But keeping that aside, another story where, again, all of this comes together is Minimalist is this, Indian brand which got a lot of criticism when they launched because they were this blatant copy of a very successful international brand called The Ordinary that I think was bought by Estee Lauder last year for close to $1 billion. And everything from, the packaging to the social media to the positioning, all of it was very borrowed from The Ordinary. Long story short, the Minimalist had significant success in India, right? I remember when Sequoia invested in Minimalist, their, press release said something along the lines of like the fastest D2C brand to hit 100 crores ARR or some such thing. Now that Ordinary has launched in India, the real question to ask is, what happens to the Minimalist? Will they continue to succeed? Will a rising tide lift all boats? Or will, consumers realize that the Ordinary may or may not be a better product and switch boats over here? So before we get into Revlon, what is your 2 cents on Minimalist versus Ordinary, and how do you handle an international brand coming into your territory?
I'm like, do consumers really... I mean, do they look at this as being do they care? It's another brand for them to kind of pick. There are too many brands in this space anyway. And they might just pick one or the other. It's going to come down to... it might not come down to branding anymore. Also... But actually, weirdly enough, if I had a choice between a brand called Minimalist and a brand called Ordinary, I might pick Minimalist just from like a name perspective, right? And I'm just talking very bare bones, like brand this thing in that sense. So I don't know if the larger consumer cares unless it's a consumer who's aware of Ordinary from, like, say, how they are globally. I think a regular Indian consumer will just look at values, look at branding, and just pick what makes sense to them. I don't think it's going to affect the Minimalist business as much as we would assume. I feel that the larger market being crowded is what might affect it a lot more than just the Ordinary coming in. My question is actually on the other side, saying how will the Ordinary differentiate itself, because they've come in later. So some of us know this is an international brand coming to India, but how do they differentiate themselves from the Minimalist who's already been here? People might think of it the other way around if they weren't aware enough. So I would say the pressure is a lot more on the Ordinary than it is on Minimalist.
I think that's an interesting way to, to look at it. And I think one genius move for the Ordinary was, so typically their products are priced at, in between 800 to about 2,500, $3,000. They've actually priced very competitively in India. So the price of their product in India is 500 rupees upwards, which I thought was a, super, super, super smart move. I think the second thing where, as much as I love Indian beauty brands, there's a beauty blogger called Komal Basit who actually said this really well, where her basic thing was the biggest problem with Indian beauty brands is like consistency and efficacy of products. So, everyone starts with these, great dreams of my product will do this and that. And especially, the space that Ordinary and Minimalist is in, they are actually performance beauty brands. So the only reason, it's not like it's a moisturizer, right? Where like performance is equal to, is my skin creamier than it was 5 minutes before? This is literally like, are you reducing my acne? Are you removing, acne marks? Are you, clearing or minimizing my pores. So, and I think that was the Ordinary's genius in the US, right? And in the international markets, where it was genuinely a high performance, high efficacy brand brought to customers at, super, super, super competitive prices compared to, the American, counterparts. And I think the thing that, this will come down to, in my opinion, is two things. One is, can the Minimalist actually live up to the value proposition of its brand, and can its ingredients, its supply chain actually deliver what it needs to deliver versus this large brand that now is under the portfolio of Estee Lauder. In fact, I was going through a couple of Reddit threads which our producer Jalasmi had shared on that doc, and what was interesting was, the Minimalist, apparently a couple of customers were complaining about this, but the Minimalist doesn't talk about who they've got their certification from. And this was another point that came up from, that beauty blogger Komal Basit, who said that the biggest problem in India is there's no certification for authenticity of products. So you're saying, this product has 3% peptides, but, does it actually? In the US, you can get sued for this shit, man. Like someone just won some suit. Yeah, like over here, there's nothing like that, right? So I think for better or for worse, a lot of Indian beauty and personal care brands have unfortunately, built their companies on the assumption that, inhi kya parwa hai, right? Like as long as it's cheap and, as long as it's like 10% better than the next best alternative, log khareed lenge. But, more than just the Ordinary versus Minimalist, I think with more international brands coming in, and you've seen Nykaa do a good job with this with like Huda Beauty, Charlotte Tilbury and the likes, what really, Indian brands will have to really up the ante either on their formula, on, how they think about their distribution. So, if I were the Minimalist, I'd really think about how is my distribution going to be different from the Ordinary, because the Ordinary will have bigger budgets.
Also, the type with Nykaa really helps them, right? They can be a lot more front-faced.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, segueing into the other part of the story, which was Revlon's bankruptcy, I think for me, one big sort of takeaway from this Ordinary versus Minimalist conversation is what happens when beauty brands become irrelevant. I was reading this really good article on Business of Fashion about, Revlon's bankruptcy, and the biggest reason for them basically going bankrupt is over a period of time, they just became irrelevant. And then they tried everything to pump up the brand, right? Like they did this collaboration with Megan Stallion, who launched like a set of products under, the Revlon sort of umbrella. They launched this very weird Gen Z focused brand called Flesh, which was supposed to be a sub-brand under Revlon, which also didn't really end up going anywhere. So question for you, man, like with beauty becoming so competitive, every celebrity and its mother launching a brand, how do you really see differentiation, existing?
I feel that at some point, branding is getting tougher in the beauty space because as much as you want to differentiate, you're largely focusing on the same set of parameters. I think it's gone down to like nitty-gritties of really tiny differences. So largely it is going to come down to the product. End of the day, as much as you might do on branding and advertising, and that gets you the eyeballs, right? You got to do that for sure. And I think branding in today's world is more important than performance marketing because performance has slowly, like I think especially for the digital first brands, has really become this problem where it's no longer working, especially with like what Apple did and what Google's kind of done across their cookies and all that stuff. So branding super important. But I feel in the long run, people are sticking to brands where they actually like the quality of the product and they actually want to keep buying it because you will do one purchase, but that repeat purchase only happens if you like it. And I feel that's really going to be the key here, which actually might be a good thing for some of the older brands because they've had years of experience in doing this, but they're not nimble enough. I think the problem with a lot of these things you said, like you're launching so many brands and products, is that you're trying to jump onto trends. And at some point, you got to jump onto trends in a nimble fashion and not in a conglomerate fashion. And I feel that would kind of have hurt Revlon is because once you have too many layers in an organization, for you to kind of jump onto a trend, you spend way more than if you're a smaller company. So I feel for the big guys, they got to understand how to kind of jump onto trends in a slightly nimbler fashion. But I feel that in the long run, and you mentioned this with the Minimalist as well, the quality of the product, consistency of the brand, and also really like, and I know everybody says being authentic is a thing, but I feel at some point, seeming like you're sticking to the same line long enough is important because if you're jumping onto every trend, you are not sticking to any. So I feel that's the problem. You get confusing for the consumer saying, okay, what is this brand for? Kind of what happened to Glossier, right? I mean, Glossier is a great example of that they jumped onto so many things, did so much that their core consumer was like, okay, what's going on? So I feel in the long run, it's going to come down to the product as it should. And, but I think the frenzy of jumping onto trends needs to be a little calmer. And I think what Hailey Bieber launched a brand as well, if I remember right, last week.
Yeah, a brand called Rhode, Rhode. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's so many of them now, but people will keep buying stuff. People will keep buying products, and these are products which are like fast moving anyway. But at the end of the day, how long do you going to stick onto this? How do you evolve? You got to take a Kardashian point of view on this one to kind of see how you can stay long term. I feel that more than anybody else.
But, I think even though BPC seems very crowded, I think there is an opportunity to actually build brands by figuring out niches within the market, going balls to wall on that, with respect to that niche, and then using that as a way to, expand your product lines, right? You're seeing this happen very successfully in the US right now where, because diversity has become such a big sort of talking point, you're seeing a lot of, for example, hair care brands that are coming out, specifically targeting African-American hair, right? Or you've got, for example, like what Fenty Beauty did, where they said, why are there only 8 shades of foundation? And they went out saying, you know what, our go-to market is going to be 55 shades of foundation to actually cover the scope of, as many skin tones as is possible, and everyone's not, gora, chitta, savla, whatever. I think there are a lot of, especially in India, dude. I was talking to, a founder in the BPC space earlier this week, and India is such a diverse country. Everyone, for some weird reason, only ends up focusing on North Indians. I think there are so many interesting localized products that can be built for, customers with curly hair, with, frizzy hair, bouncy hair, different skin tones. Literally, like, my skin will be different from yours based purely on, how we're genetically made. That's one. And the second is the weather conditions that our skin has to go through. So I think a lot can be done, but I'm genuinely just not seeing enough, companies going after those really unique spaces and building something, revolutionary for a niche. But beauty is a never-ending topic. We should get to your story now.
Speaking of never-ending topics, have you seen the story happening around Dukaan and what they're kind of saying about Shopify? So Dukaan, for those who kind of don't know, they're similar to Shopify. They're helping merchants set up online stores, etc. Very interesting founders, if I put it that way. So there was this, they just launched.
What a polite guy.
What a polite guy. They just launched the product outside India as well. They're saying, gone global now. We're going to hit Shopify where they're at and stuff. Okay, let me change my word from interestingly aggressive founders in every form of you can think of. So there's this Twitter thread I came across, which is where this story kind of then got onto our sheet. Was the CTO of Dukaan does this long thread about why Shopify doesn't work and what their biggest problems are. And he gone to this deep dive about why it's throttling in India, why performance is really bad, especially in India. And he's compared some data points. He's taken like a bunch of Indian brands, like let's say Boat, Bummer, Urban Monkey, and Hammer, and he's gone deep into that stuff. And he's showing that performance is working really well globally, but it's not working well in India. Something's happening here. And so I didn't know who this person was. I ran through the entire thread, and at the end of it, he then talks about how Dukaan is amazing, and Dukaan keeps coming up. So at some point, I went to his profile. I'm like, 1 second, you're a competitor. You are literally making a thread about showing how bad Shopify is, although Shopify is the dominant global player in this front. I don't know, bit like under the belt way to do it. Would you rather, I can't expect classy, but I'm like, can you just be like normal?
I mean, first, like the first discussion point over here is behavior, right? And what I found absurd was there were a bunch of obviously tech bros retweeting his tweet saying, wow, what audacity, is bande mein dum hai, he is going after a Shopify, with this like great tweet thread, blah, blah, bullshit. So one part of it was just like, dude, forget low blow, not low blow, whatever, right? Like, it's just like, man, chill out. This like random, nitpicking, contextless. He obviously gave a lot of examples in this, that, and the other. And genuinely, dude, maybe their technology is better, but there are ways to demonstrate that, like through case studies, right? So one part of it, which is like the clickbaitiness of it, just seemed like this, strange growth hack that could be a one-hit wonder. But I don't know how much, brand adoption they got through this. The second problem that I have, which is, it's not even a problem, but, I'd encourage these guys to think about this is, if you genuinely want to solve for D2C, right? Step number 1, understand what D2C is. And if you genuinely want to be Shopify's competitor, understand how they build their business versus, and I'm not saying they don't, but like, from this thread, apparently that's not what came out. I don't think Shopify's, a competitor is going to copy paste Shopify and beat them on performance for two reasons. One, literally everyone is trying to find Facebook and, Instagram alternatives. So if your whole thread is about how I will help you get better CACs on Facebook and Instagram, which is literally what it came down to, that's a really 2010 problem statement to solve, because now the conversation's evolved, bro. No one gives two shits about improving their FB and IG CAC, because everyone's focus right now is how do I find an alternative to, these two platforms that are just becoming a drain on my money and resources. That's number one.
Yeah.
And second, dude, is if you study Shopify, what was Shopify's success? You tell me, what was Shopify's success?
For me, Shopify was honestly a way to was an alternative to Amazon, because everybody was on Amazon and you were stuck in this entire sea of a marketplace. And you say, I could actually own my own store, control that data, and kind of have the consumer experience not leave my platform. I mean, for me, that's what Shopify started off as.
So Shopify's genius was that they did what very few companies, SaaS companies actually do, which is they built a market. D2C was not a terminology that was used up until Shopify came around, right? So Shopify's genius was that they went after a set of merchants in certain, if you look at the best performing merchants on Shopify, right? They're all in lifestyle categories. They're in categories like, beauty, fashion, etc., etc. So if you look at what Shopify did, they actually created a quote-unquote class of merchants who, now are popularly called D2C brands. And they built technology for this class of merchants. And the type of merchants that they went after was a solopreneur. It was meant for an entrepreneur. Shopify is all about that entrepreneurial spirit. So if you genuinely want to beat Shopify, my friend, you need to find another merchant cohort. You can't beat them on the game that they invented. So I think just from and I know I'm very riled up about this, but it's come
no, it's just
on,
the attitude also,
man.
but...
Dude, one is the attitude and the second is so low, bro. At least understand your space. You've done this thread and you are saying that you're going to, compete with them internationally. Kudos to you. And I, genuinely hope that they make a dent, somewhere, because God knows it would make all of us proud if, an Indian company came up and was actually like what Freshworks did, right? And is actually able to make a dent, like what Freshworks did to Salesforce. Could Dukaan do that to Shopify? Sure thing. But at least understand the space. And I think that I will end my spiel with one small thing, which is Shopify is not even it's not even the only biggest SaaS platform for sellers that's out there. There are many other, alternatives that exist. And I know Shopify is the most popular and trendy one. But long story short, if you genuinely want to... If you want to beat Shopify, the thing that's going to help you beat them is not making a faster freaking website. It is you literally either help merchants find differentiated distribution, channels and strategies apart from Facebook and Instagram. And the second is you create a class of merchants that is special and unique to you, which his thread doesn't do. And with that, my friends, my debate is over.
And that's the bottom line, cause Suchita says so.
Mic drop. But in any case,
a shout out to Bhavesh Rugwani, who tagged me on a retweet saying, please talk about this on Think Fast. So Bhavesh, we have spoken about this. Suchita has spoken about this and given you
I'm
a
so
broad
sorry,
landscape.
Guys. This it just really hurts my heart, man.
I know. So we go for a break and we right back on Think Fast. Welcome back to Think Fast, where we are back. Are you fine, Suchita? Have you calmed down? क्या आप ठीक हो?
Yeah. No. It's just man, I don't know how to explain it to you. There are some things that I feel very strongly about, and one of them is understanding small to mid-sized businesses. But in any case, let's help you out. Let's help you out with...
Yes, please. Meri madad karo. Meri madad. I have problems.
Guys, there is a whole segment that has come up because, like sellers, Varun also has performance issues, which we will not get too deeply into. But in any case, keeping on, I feel we should do an Indian version of Superbad. But
yes.
I'm Jonah Hill and you're Michael Cera, and we basically recreate that whole movie. I think it'll be amazing.
Idea for a promo for this show, guys.
Of course. But the story you guys are talking about right now is startup solving for erectile dysfunction. And you'll obviously hear a lot of edible jokes. So if you are very ram about these things, guys, please shut your ears or just fast forward to the next segment. But Varun, I know the larger story over here is ED, and I can keep making fun of you, over this. But don't you find it like really refreshing and nice that, conversations like this have become mainstream?
Yeah, I think it also kind of came from the fact that if you look at a lot of these companies, they started off with a topic which was an easy way to get in, which was hair loss. If you look at, Man Matters, a bunch of them, they got into hair loss. They progressed towards, let's say, ED and like say piles and a bunch of other things like gut health. Also, you don't say piles, you say gut health. You're going to get in through that. So we also kind of have to thank a lot of the startups in the West who started off this whole trend, right? If you look at for Hims.
Yeah.
Now it's Hims and Hers, right? I think the two brands which they have, if I remember right. And they also kind of saw the opportunity. And so we've kind of said, okay, let's bring that to India. How do we bring it to India? But I think it's refreshing for sure, because these are problems which are always like, very like, when you go into like a medical shop and they would give you, I never understood why sanitary pads have to be given inside that brown packet, like it's something you have to hide, or even condoms. But I think at some point we've gone beyond that weird brown packet, which is slid to you like it's some like contraband that you're getting.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's not just, categories like, the ones you mentioned, but for instance, you're seeing, investments in spaces like IVF, you're seeing investments in spaces like PCOS, menopause. So you're seeing all of these, very like awkward phases of a human's natural life. You're seeing a lot of those become fairly large opportunities that are also attracting venture capital, which is fantastic to see. In fact, I'm forgetting the name of the company, but I know Sequoia recently invested in this general space of, IVF and pregnancy at large. You've also seen companies like PSafe and, Sirona, etc., pick up conversations around, menstruation and, menstrual cups and this, that, and the other. So, and it's fascinating because, to exactly the point that you made, I remember even like 6-7 years ago when I would go to the chemist to pick up a, sanitary pad, you'd be a little embarrassed, right? Like, you'd wait for like people in the chemist store to leave, and then, sneakily pick up that Whisper packet, put it in a brown bag and then snicker off. But it's just really, I don't know, maybe it's only a tier 1 phenomena right now, but it's just very refreshing to see this general change in narrative and also confidence that people are getting to talk about awkward topics. And just one small thing over here, you're also seeing the conversation not just limit itself to, a company's website or their app, but even their social media is very,
strategy as well.
All in. Yeah.
And if you think about it, making them digital focused also helps, because at some point you couldn't have it on hoardings, you couldn't have it on ads because you were worried about just like how people can take it. Here you can kind of like focus a little bit more, put it online. People feel less pressured when you don't have that creepy store uncle look at you like, acha, condom chahiye. Like almost like, oh, I know what you're going to do. I'm like, of course you know what I'm going to do, you idiot. That's why I'm buying it. But I think that barrier has kind of been taken away as well, which helps, especially when it's a problem. Like I feel that the whole hair loss part, right? People would not go and buy, let's say, biotin, etc. Now it's become like commonplace. I mean, everybody uses biotin and everything else. Yeah. And I'm a huge gummy consumer. So actually, I have a larger question for you. While these are very specific cases, they go more medicinal in that sense. Do you see this as a larger area of growth for wellness? Is this where wellness is really going, rather from not the broader, let's say, let's go plant protein, let's go, what's the other one, which is now everybody's kind of doing is collagen?
Collagen, yeah. For your like hair and your nails and skin and all of that.
I got targeted for Korean marine collagen. I'm like, 1 second, what is this? I'm considering it. I think my skin needs it.
Guys drink. Yeah, it really does, especially now that you're inching towards 40. No, but, we've discussed this in past episodes, but I think the thing that makes this space so interesting is, literally my little spiel right before the break was about how actually the need of the hour is finding new channels of customer acquisition, right? Not just counting on Facebook and Instagram and, ending your like quote unquote D2C journey there. And I think that's where a lot of these companies and the way the problem solving is fascinating. So what I've seen a lot of these companies do is, they have B2C acquisition and they have B2B acquisition, right? Okay. And for instance, if you open, platforms like Allo Health, ALLO Health, which is a company we, spoke about when they had just raised their money. I think they've raised about 4.4 million from Nexus Ventures and Vinny Bansal and a few other folks. Their customer funnel is fascinating. So what they really do is they have to work very closely with doctors and with experts in the field, because, some of these medicines are, above the counter. Some of them, require some amount of prescription, etc. I think the thing that makes this space very interesting is that it's not just I'm running an Instagram ad and getting an order. It's a lot of I'm creating a network of, doctors, experts who basically create a layer of trust in between the brand and the customer. There's a lot of B2B over here as well. So, for example, I won't be surprised if the next time you go to a dermatologist or, a doctor at the nearest hospital near you for something that's more, superficial, for the lack of a better word, you'll see doctors the same way they prescribe like Dolo, right? You'll see doctors saying, hey, why don't you try this Man Matters ABC XYZ? So the fascinating thing about this space, and as a marketer, it's just such a fun space to be in, because you need this layer of community building to happen in the middle. And the community is this, layer of like doctors, dermatologists, or whoever else. And that's where the space gets, it's an interesting like problem statement to solve. You know what I mean? Like marrying both the B2B as well as the B2C. So, more than just, very specific verticals of like, pregnancy, menopause, PCOS, ED, etc., etc. I think the thing I would love to work at a company like this, just because I just think it's a really fun marketing problem to solve. And the marketing problem isn't just limited to IG ad chalalo, but it's how do you build a community of trust around the brand, and how do you use that community to actually over time bring down your customer acquisition costs and, obviously drive repeatability. So that's my 2 cents on this space. Do you want to add something over here?
Yeah, I think what's also interesting is that the consumer has evolved, right, at some point. And I think the consumer now wants options, and they're seeing options on this front. I was just literally opening up websites of some of these brands while we were talking, and I realized that they've all taken the doctor route. Yeah. So they're almost medicinal in that sense, using consultations, seeing all of that stuff. And I think there's an other side of wellness, which is largely going towards how, beauty and hair and everything else in that sense. But this seems to be a space which has so much more opportunity. I mean, we spoke about beauty earlier being a crowded space, but this seems to be a space that actually has room for a lot more players in it, which kind of maybe don't even veer towards one or the other. But I think picking a specific niche, going deep, it can still make you build a really solid business. I think that's a big opportunity here.
And one small thing, and last thing on this, and then we can get on to SonyLIV, but one small thing over here is just imagine the number of data points that these companies will have about very specific, quote unquote issues. Right. Yeah. So like imagine having so much proprietary information about, postpartum care, for example, or imagine having so much proprietary information, about how men think about sex. The thing that does for you is it just enables you to build many more products that may not come through, preliminary data or, those typical reports that, everyone and their mother end up reading to, determine what the next big spaces will be. So just last thing on this, but just the amount of proprietary data that these guys will have, because they have that layer of consumer, doctor, etc., and how much they can build on top of it. I think that's what's, fascinating about these particular categories.
Just one last thing to add. I think this is a story we should do maybe sometime down the line is we need to discuss how someone like an ultra human with their biomarkers could actually be interesting for a company, which I'm going to get out of the Cyborg program. The product just came in. I'm going to start putting that sensor on once I'm back from London. But I feel it's interesting where you can actually have data and then you can base products basis that. There's a lot happening in this space which can kind of happen. But again, I think let me test myself on it for some time, like I have with the gummies. And then maybe we shall do a story on it.
And they work. Yes, Queen.
Are you a SonyLIV subscriber?
No, but I did subscribe to them briefly when Shark Tank was going on, because you forced me to watch the show and the show was fun, no doubt.
It was a lot of fun. Did you enjoy Mr. Ashwini Grover? Considering we spoke about him today. Who was your favorite Shark? I asked you this question before.
Who was my favorite Shark? I really liked Vinita. I thought she had Aman was the funniest. I think we discussed this. Aman was hilarious. Yeah. But I think from a PR ROI perspective, I think the show did wonders for more specifically Vinita, because it
perception was really strong. And so the interesting story of SonyLIV, right, is that there's this article, I think, in the Business Standard that kind of came out, which said that while Disney Plus Hotstar is still number one, has been number one for a while now, I think largely because of the cricket thing. Got to see how that changes because of cricket going away from the platform. SonyLIV has come in as the second largest player in terms of subscription, ahead of Amazon, ahead of Netflix. It's actually 3 times Netflix subscriber base, which is super interesting to think about it. I mean, if you look at the app, the amount people crib about the SonyLIV app is crazy. But they come up as number 2, which, I mean, so first reactions on the unlikely number 2 in this space?
We spoke about this in the previous segment very, very briefly, but I think SonyLIV has genuinely played the long game. I don't want to take their numbers too seriously because everyone says, we are number 2, number 3, and how they're counting subscribers. Like I shouldn't be counted as a subscriber for SonyLIV because I literally just bought it that 3 months to watch Rocket Boys and then Shark Tank. But like keeping the numbers of it aside, from the outside, you genuinely see them play the long game where they bet on non-obvious original content. They've also bet on non-obvious talent, like Scam 92, whatever it was.
92.
Yeah, so Scam, for example, had no big names, right? Neither did
Rocket
Boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and frankly, who the hell would have thought, Shark Tank with, Ashneer, Aman and all.
But you didn't expect the show to do that well, yeah.
Dude, also, they became big because of the show. None of them were individually that big, ever. It's not like they had like Sachin Bansal or, Kunal Shah, who has 500,000 Twitter followers, on it. So really non-obvious talent, non-obvious cuts. And it's that, long-term mindset which seems to be playing well for them.
What's also been interesting, if you run through the article, is they've done a few smart things, right? They didn't over-invest. If you look at what Amazon and Netflix did, and even like Hotstar, they spend a lot of money in acquiring a lot of Bollywood movies. Sony didn't do that. They didn't go after those names. They actually went after a lot of South Indian movies, which I think has really helped them because that space has actually really grown, right? It's now, I mean, if you ask me today, what is Indian cinema globally? It's all movies from the South. They're the biggest movies out there. Bollywood's like struggling to kind of keep up, even close. We didn't talk about Brahmastra, but I think at some point we will. And I feel what's also interesting for them, and if you look at it, is that it's $9.99 a year. So if you look at the amount you're paying, and which is a big question I have about the media space, I recently subscribed to Discovery Plus because there's something which Leia wanted to watch on it. And I realized that for a month you were paying, if I remember right, and I could be wrong with the numbers, about $399. But if you want to subscribe for a year, it was $699. Which, I mean, it obviously is pushing you to take the yearly subscription. But how does it make economic sense? And what numbers do you have to hit for that $699 to make sense? Because considering the fact that if you look at globally, these are insane numbers. Nobody charges this low for content outside of India. So my big question in the long term is, one is to get the subscribers. The other is, how does this still make economic sense? It might make for a Sony because they still have a TV network. TV still works in India.
Correct.
But for a non-TV player, at some point it's going to start pinching you.
Yeah, and I think the other challenge right now is all of OTT seems to be like a bit of a cluster, right? Netflix apparently is thinking of doing advertising internationally. You have Hotstar that just lost the rights to, IPL. And apparently that cost them 6 million subscribers. I don't know how, accurate that information is, but, that's what was being shared, sort of widely. But I think for them, they may have found like early traction. Like I feel like SonyLIV's done a great job of their 0 to 1, where, they found that, fitment in terms of at least their programming and to some extent their pricing. But if you were in their shoes, I don't know who runs SonyLIV in India, but if you were in their shoes, what are the money moves that you'd be making just about now?
Make the product better. I feel at some point the product has to get better. And I think they made some slow strides there, but a long way to go there. But largely kind of focus on this strategy. Don't overspend. Also, they're going to be merging with Z soon. So what does that do to Z5 versus SonyLIV in that sense? Will it all become SonyLIV? What about all the stuff that Z's been acquiring and doing? Because very different strategies, right? Considering a lot of the Z5 shows are created by Alt Balaji, which started off as a streaming service, but now seems to be providing more shows than creating. So there's a lot going to happen in their space, but just kind of stick to the basics. I feel the strategy works, but I don't know about the price point. And I think what also helped in the early days is that they actually had a lot of cricket as well for a lot of India's overseas matches, where a lot of the cribbing happened, because when you were comparing watching cricket on Sony versus watching cricket on a Hotstar, it was such a substandard experience that people would crib about it on Twitter all day long. So so I feel that they kind of stick to the same, but they need to make some more shows, I would say, like a Shark Tank, etc., which kind of latches on to a larger set of people, but be smart enough with some of these real focuses. I think the South is where they can actually really make a difference because they have a lot of subscribers from the South.
Gotcha.
And they have Kapil Sharma too. Thank you, Jalasmi, for letting us know.
Oh.
Yeah. I cannot still watch.
Mr. Kapil.
I watch it occasionally. But it stopped being funny a long time ago, if you ask me. Kapil Sharma stopped being funny a long time ago. But we have done all of this. Should we get into questions from our listeners now? Or do we have any more stories to talk about?
I think we have to take a break and then we get into questions from our listeners.
चलो लेते हैं break. उसके बाद आएंगे वापस आपके questions का आंसर देने के लिए. See you after the break, guys.
Welcome back to Think Fast, where we're going to answer some audience questions. We got a bunch of really interesting audience questions in, so we're going to go through a few of them. Let's do the first one. The first one is from Swati Sharma. She says, agencies want to hire young, fresh folks who are impressionable, full of energy, and more likely to stay for longer and build loyalty. But sadly, no senior folks have the time to train or mentor them. I'm guessing this is straight to me. Have you struggled with this at the Glitch or any other experiences? I'm trying to build a solution for this and would really appreciate your input. I don't think that young people do want to stay for longer. I feel staying longer and loyalty are some of those things that haven't really been a thing. I would say in for a long time now, right? You're looking at the opportunity, you see how much you grow, you're seeing how much you enjoy the work that you do and how you can see yourself progress and move ahead. I would say learning and development is one of the biggest problems in the agency space because you can't allocate a lot of resources towards it because everybody needs to work on the business. But at some level, what's become interesting is that if you work with the right set of clients, if you work with the right set of clusters and you structured right, there's enough learning on the job you can actually do. The problem is when you work in too wide a structure where, it's like that old school pyramid structure, you're going to learn less. But if you work in clusters, this is what we've actually done over time. We center a lot of teams around brands which we have. And that really helps in L&D. And we try to build some pieces around it. But I don't think large-scale L&D programs work. Give people opportunities to do stuff, do certifications, do courses, etc., figure a way for the company to contribute into that helps a lot more than building your own L&D system because that's an expense. There's enough resources out there. That's at least my perspective. Thoughts from your end as well? Sure.
Great question, Swati. Dude, you're in the agency space, so you know the length and breadth of this. But I don't know. I think one small addition that I'll make to this is, and I think this is one space where we've improved a lot. But give people a point of view on where their future is headed. I think when you're at the bottom of the rung, right, it's very easy to not just be like overwhelmed, but also to not really have career clarity. And unfortunately, for some dumb reason, people think career growth is equal to moving to another organization, but it could be moving to a different role within the same organization. And I mean, I can give this to you in writing. I don't know a single founder who is not thinking of employee retention. Maybe not all employees, but you definitely want your best performing, most contributing, hardest working employees to stay. So put your hand up, ask for more opportunities, and as a manager, give folks who work with you an understanding of where their career is going. So that's question number one. Thanks, Swati.
It's a good question. Question number 2. What product or services categorically should upcoming entrepreneurs consider for the future? I mean, do we have an entire episode for this? She wants to, Harsh wants us to have a discussion about it.
Harshita, we are way over our allotted time for this episode, so we will not be able to have a long discussion, but Varun's going to tell you his favorite sector, which is?
I think there is a gap in the wellness space more and more. And I've actually got this insight from my dear co-host who has told this to me. And I think there's a gap there. There's a lot that can happen there. And I feel that there is a way to make that a digital first business, but yet have a product there for many people. But if I had to pick another one, I would say what's really undertapped right now is still, weirdly enough, I would say EdTech right now is not EdTech at all. I feel that true EdTech hasn't been built yet. We've just figured a way to put tuitions online. And I feel there's still an opportunity there.
Yep. And if I had to add to that, 100% agree. I think, more than wellness is one part of health, but I think, health hasn't got the attention, it necessarily deserves. And I think one part of it is also because it's that whole thing of, is health a public or a private good? Or, medicine at large, is it a public or a private good? Is it something that, should be, provided, subsidized to, consumers? Or is it something that, you can make a profit off of? And I think that's where, these spaces that we just discussed of, which we discussed in the ED segment, I think all those spaces are genuinely very interesting to solve for. And not only are they interesting, like quote unquote medicinal or like health related problems to solve for, it's a marketer's delight, man. Like it's so, you know what I mean? What a fun problem statement to like not have the option of spending money on Facebook and Instagram and genuinely using your brain to figure out how can I genuinely build modes of distribution. So I think that's one. I think the second thing, which I love that we got from Meeta Malhotra in our earlier on episodes, but I think there's going to be a move back to basics in this whole, consumer brand space. I think there are a lot of basics, which, for example, we've seen Decathlon do a very good job for solving for, where they've just taken basics of like, athletics or outdoor exploration, blah, blah, bullshit. And they've given it to consumers in a, cost effective, standardized and efficient way. So those would be the two spaces. Obviously, you guys all, if you listen to us often enough, I am like very bullish on home and decor, but outside of that, these two. And the last question is
our sources of business news. It's almost like we would like to thank for all our episodes these people for giving us the fodder to yap about. Yeah, what are your favorites actually?
So I think apart from the obvious like news sources, I love this. I follow a lot of like international websites. So Business of Fashion is one, Glossy is another, Modern Retail is another. I like listening to podcasts like Invest Like the Best. I also follow a lot of newsletters. So Sociology of Business, Lean Lux. There's another one which is launched by the folks who run Pool Suite, which is super fun. I think for me, it'll be, a permutation and combination of these. I love Vanity Fair, Airmail, which again are my sources for all cultural news, but that's about it.
Yeah, obviously there's Cap Table, Ken, Morning Context. Some of these are, give us great insights into things. I actually really like the information, which is global publication, but deep insight into like tech as well as creator economy. Publish Press, great newsletter to kind of tap into for anything creator. A lot of TikTok stuff there, but you still get insights into other stuff. And actually the Quartz has actually been my go-to business news for so long, and actually general broader news as well. I go into that. And how can I forget the Twitter? The Twitter se milta hai bahut kuch humko news.
Yes, the Twitter, and how can we not do Peripona to pivot?
And Jalasmi, our dear Jalasmi, who is our biggest source of information. One question is left. What's the way to deal with inflation?
Yeah, it's about inflation, yaar. How do you deal with inflation? Mahima yaar, poor Varun is left with £1. That is how you deal with inflation.
I have £1. But I'm not joking. But I have a Forex card. मेरे पास है card. मैं बस joke कर रहा था. Joke. है मेरे पास Forex card. But Mahima, I have no idea how to deal with inflation. I think the whole point is that stick to fundamentals. Over time, these things level out. But that's the only generic answer I can give. Unless you have some CNBC stuff to add.
I have no tippany to add over here.
Thanks, Jalasmi, for throwing this question at us and making us seem like fools after we said thank you. What is your recommendation?
Recommendations.
What is it? What is yours?
So I actually really like this Jennifer Lopez documentary on Netflix, man, called Halftime. Yeah, like and while watching it, I was all like, shit, man, she's literally like Beyonce. But you know what I mean? Like she doesn't have that halo effect that Beyonce does.
Yeah.
And she was, first to talking about body positivity, and, her movies have been great. I haven't seen Hustlers, but apparently that movie is fantastic in her performance. It is.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So, and her songs, oh my God, dude, they're like literally like class 5 to class 12 was vibing to J-Lo. And I play her tunes ever so often. So that's my recommendation. Watch Halftime with J-Lo.
What is my recommendation? My recommendation is play with dolls. People playing with dolls is a good thing. I spent the afternoon yesterday sitting with my daughter, and both of us played with 2 Barbies. I named one Kanta, I named the other one Sunita. But once in a while, Kanta would put her hair in front of her and become Kamolika. And it's great education for me as a father. Great learning for her as a daughter.
Mahima, this is how you deal with inflation. You play, it's either inflation or it's erectile dysfunction. One or the other.
Kanta became Kamolika when the hair went in front.
You call them Sunita. And oh my God, I can't do this no more. Please enjoy your holiday, Varun. You need to stop playing with dolls.
I'm going to go in front of, one second, guys, I'm going to do this. Okay, I'm going to go. If you're watching this on
and call it an Eiffel Tower.
If you're not, no.
I've ruined your joke before you
I will go
it.
In front of
Vodafone connection.
No, in front of Buckingham Palace. Hold my camera like this and say, देखिए यहाँ अंदर छिपा हुआ है कोहिनूर. हम लेके आएंगे इसको वापस अपना देश. I will do that with my camera. But
you're going to get roofied by one of the guards there. That's what's going to happen to you.
But yes, miss me next week, guys, and I will be back for the next one.
Oh my God, my favorite co-host Amit Doshi is going to be here.
Yes.
Yay!
Yes. Doshi. Gurudev Doshi.
Second favorite co-host. Gurudev Doshi, yes. Alrighty, with that, toodles my poodles. Enjoy London town.
Toodles.
Bye.